Well, welcome back to Bookish, everybody. We're your virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life, produced as always by the Southern California News Group in conjunction with the Bay Area News Group. And I'm Sam Dunn, the senior editor of premium content here. I want to begin by giving a big, huge, wet kiss thank you to our Reader Reward subscribers because you're the ones who support our programs and make everything possible. And if you are a Reader Reward subscriber attending tonight, you are, as always, automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate, this time to Once Upon a Time Bookstore in Montrose, one of our favorite independent bookstores. Our winner last month was Patricia Lindsay. Patricia, we hope you're enjoying those books. Read away, read away. And if you're not a subscriber yet, real talk, you guys, why aren't you a subscriber? In Southern California, please go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper. And in the Bay Area, go to bayarianewsgroup.com/reader services. Please, we ask you, become a stakeholder in local journalism and keep everything going. Also, if you have missed our past programs, go to scng.com/virtual programs and check those out. Also, while you're checking things out, check out our cool Bookish swag for stylish book nerds. And as always, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar. And if you just want to add a comment, use a yeah, sure. I've said this 5,000 times and I'm still making mistakes. If you just want to add a comment, use the chat feature that's also found on your screen. And don't worry if you won't miss anything because a link is going to be sent to you later of the full program. And the show is also posted at scng.com/virtual events as well as on YouTube. So check that out. Tonight, we've got two very exciting writers who also happen to be musicians, perhaps failed rock gods, but we'll talk more about that, who also, ironically, happen to be Zooming to us from locales in the British Isles. So first up, let me introduce my dear friend, author, Joshua Mohr. Josh, are you there? Josh, yay. Josh is the author.
Hello.
Woo, here he is. He's the author of
How are you,
6 books.
Sam?
How are you?
I'm
Let me tell
great. So nice
everybody
to
how
see
cool
you.
you are. I'm so glad to see you. Let me tell everybody how cool you are, and then let's talk.
Ooh, I love that. Let's do that for
All
sure.
right. So he's so cool. He's the author of 6 books, including Damascus, which was a New York Times success. They called it Beat Poet Cool. His book, Some Things That Meant the World to Me, was the Oprah magazine 10 Terrific Reads of 2009. And he's also won the Northern California Book Award twice. Termit Parade, yeah, one of his other books was an editor's choice on the New York Times bestseller list. And also, not to be missed, is one of my favorite memoirs, the 2001 memoir Model Citizen. Absolutely read it. In his Hollywood life, he sold projects to AMC, ITV, and Amblin Entertainment, aka Steven Spielberg. His latest project that we're going to talk about is a trilogy, all to be published in 1 calendar year because he's insane. And that starts with Saint the Terrifying, the subject of our talk tonight. In Saint the Terrifying, a one-eyed ex-con West Oakland punk guitarist chases down a gang of thieves targeting musicians. And on stage, Saint, our protagonist, wears yellow neon antlers. And when he's off stage, he's a vigilante bringing down this crime ring using the skills he got being raised as a Viking by his dad in the wilds of Norway. Yes, this is all one book, you guys. Josh, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
I can't wait to nerd out. Let's have some fun.
In a lot of ways, this book is what I would call a solid Josh Mohr book. I mean, we're talking about people on the ratted fringe of society, and we've got raucous bad behavior happening all over the place. Yet it's an order of magnitude more epic and wild than anything I think you have ever done. I'm just interested to know, what the heck were you thinking? No, the question is, what began this? What was the genesis of Saint?
I have an 11-year-old daughter and took her to the Nordic History Museum. She wanted to learn more about the Viking side of her family. And as I was leaving, I picked up a book. I just love to read everything. And I read this Icelandic Viking saga, and suddenly I read 3 and 9, and they just kind of kept metastasizing. And they just felt like this beautiful permission slip to marry genre in these really exciting and really dynamic ways. these sagas are adventure stories and they're love stories and there's surrealism and I always wanted to work in crime, and there's odd ribbons of noir in these Icelandic Viking sagas as well. So it just felt like this permission slip to do something that I've never really done before, and that was to intentionally be aesthetically Baroque in 2024 America, the marriage of the high and the low, and
Yeah.
mix all of these together in this sort of undeniable stew.
It is incredible and it feels so natural. It feels like it's just pouring out of you, Josh.
These books do kind of tend to write themselves. Saint has such a dynamic and vibrant cadence. I was really trying to push the language on the line level. Like my poor
Yeah.
copy editor, like what I was doing with the sentence structures, what I was doing imagistically. I was really thinking about this kind of new style that I was kind of calling the broken Baroque.
Mm.
And so I really pushed the language as far as I possibly could.
Wow. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I want to talk about the idea of wrangling this multi-headed hydra that you have. Um, I understand from us talking, full disclosure, you guys, Josh is a personal friend. We've taught together and talked together for many years now. Um, but you're not outlining. You didn't start out with a map at least. How does this work for you? And given the number of places that you go and the number of characters that you have, how do you keep them all straight now? What's the process?
Well, I mean, luckily, this wasn't my first book, right? So I
Right.
had this sort of proof of concept that I could have no plan and it would kind of work out in the end. So all of my novels, I only want to know the opening chapter. And one of the things I treasure as an auteur is that sort of reckless, relentless process of discovery where I have no idea what's going to come next. That's the most exciting way for me. And I always feel like, the Kerouac thing, right? You surprise yourself, surprise your audience.
Right.
So I just sort of let these books get as out of control as they wanted to get. I knew I had about 1,000 pages to play with. I knew that it was going to be sort of serialized over three discrete trajectories, though if I've done my job properly, they're all sort of building to one big crescendo as we get deep into book three. And to your point earlier, this character was the sort of person, and you know this as well as being a writer, certain people just squawk in your ear in such an intimate way from the rip.
Yeah.
Certain characters make us work harder to get to know him or them, right? But Saint was just right in my ear in the most capital I intimate way right away. It was truly a collaboration. I know that sounds schizophrenic, but it was the two of us
Yeah.
doing this dance together.
I totally get that. There's a riff that goes on in this book that begins, "You are a person." And I could almost hear, I don't know how, I don't know how to say this, but I could almost hear this character saying to you, writer, you are a person. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, I think there's a kind of this love letter to my id too, where like, what if there were no rules? What if there were no codes? What if I was allowed to do sort of every demented thing that went through my head?
Yeah.
Now I have the opportunity in this Viking saga in which there are no rules, to go as mad as I probably would like to go if it wouldn't send me to prison.
No comment there. Anyway, speaking of going to prison, our character has been in prison. He spent
Hmm.
a lot of time in San Quentin. Um, and part of what is so attractive about him is this sense of, yeah, he's an ex-con, but there is such a sense of justice in him.
Yeah.
Twisted justice, perhaps, but um, I've heard you say that you took inspiration from Sergio Leone's anti-heroes. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because Saint is definitely in that category.
Yeah, I mean, I love Sergio Leone movies. And so that was certainly what I was thinking about. The hero that sort of rides into town is doing the right thing, but his means to do so might be coloring outside of the lines. So I was
Yeah.
really thinking about that. And then, as I was in graduate school, I taught a lot in prisons and halfway house, and I still continue to teach at halfway house. It's a population I feel very drawn to service as a part of my sobriety. So giving back to them kind of keeps me on the sunny side of the street. So I really wanted to write a story that sort of honored a lot of that experience. But again, I was also thinking about sort of that the code, of those Sergio Leone heroes and kind of put those things together and to try to tell this kind of new school punk rock Viking story, which sounds crazy, but I think it kind of is really fun.
It totally works. The ethos seems to be just lines up perfectly between punk rock and Vikings. One of the aspects of the book that was all aspects of the book are very interesting, but you have a fictionalized version of the 2016 ghost ship warehouse fire.
Yeah.
There's an artistic space where squat house where everybody congregates and all of this tragedy happens. But it's clearly based on the ghost ship warehouse. I know you're originally from the Bay Area. Can you talk about that? When did that manifest itself in your story, or did you have an idea that you wanted to write into that before?
I love projects of revisionist history. That's like one of my favorite things to nerd out to. If you even think about, Tarantino's last one, or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where we're sort of dealing with the parallel world of, the Manson family. And I've carried around the idea that eventually I wanted to try to do that and was just sort of waiting for the right idea to sort of turn that loose on the page in the way that it would need to be turned loose. I'm also a lifelong punk rocker. I lived in punk houses in my teens and early 20s. So it's an ecosystem that I can write about the culture from the inside out rather than being some tourist writing about it from the outside in.
Yeah.
In fact, Saint, the singer or the main character, sings in a band called Slummy. And we actually made a record, this fictional record of Slummy. I took a bunch of musicians into the studio and we cut Saint's music, and the record comes out the same day that the first book comes out.
And
So I
you
knew I
and
wanted
you're
to
the
write.
lead singer, right? You're the lead
Yeah, I
singer.
wrote all the songs. I'm singing
Yeah,
on all the songs. My best
right.
friend in Seattle is a music producer who did Pearl Jam's Gigaton and all the cool Thunder Pussy stuff. So I told him, I'm like, I'm not going to pay you anything, and you have to do this with me. And we
Or
just had an
else.
absolute blast in the studio. So, but that's a long way to say I knew I wanted to write about punk rock, and I knew that I wanted to write about Ghost Ship. 36 people died in a warehouse fire. And so I thought to myself, what if my kind of magical ex-con was able to get all of these people out of the room? And so maybe they don't burn up in the fire. So
Yeah.
there's a big and important, division between exploitation and reclamation. And what I really wanted to figure out to do was to honor the legacies of these young people who lost their lives. So I actually name everybody in the book.
Yeah.
I really wanted to figure out a way that they get to live forever. And these ghosts have the opportunity to live on this page and honor them in this sort of sovereign way where I'm hoping people choose to read that section of the book out loud and have the opportunity to kind of, in a very evocative way, kind of speak these angels' names for us.
Right. Say their names, keep them alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
I I love that. I love as I was telling you earlier, one of the things that is so intoxicating about this book is the percussive rhythmic quality of the narrative. And I don't think there's a way we can talk about it so much as I just want to hear you read from it so everyone can experience it. Can you do that?
Oh, I'd love to read a short scene. Yeah, for sure. All you would really need to know to set this scene up is that the main character has one eye, and this scene is actually in San Quentin. This was a small, simple story about a human being named Dennis who had been slowly going blind. He had glaucoma, everything losing color, focus. There were no foregrounds or backgrounds left for Dennis. No, there were only walls of color, all oozing toward blackness. Dennis knew better than to wake me up early, but on that morning, he said to me before the sun came up, "Hey, can you help me?" He turned on the little light, stood next to my bunk. "I'm sleeping, Dennis," I said. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry." "Well, then let's talk later," I said. "The thing is," said Dennis, "that I'm about to go blind." I sat up in bed. "What?" "Right now," he said. Well, then yell for the guard. It's all been getting dimmer and dimmer, he said, but it's all almost gone, man. I can barely see. So go to the dock, I said. Oh, believe me, he said. I've seen plenty of them, and they all said this day would come sooner or later. I just didn't know today was the one. You started this off by asking if I could help you, I said. Right, said Dennis. I did say that. I'm sorry. I'm flustered. I've never gone blind before. It's a lot to take in. I want you to help me figure out what I should look at. What's the last thing I should see? We peered around the cell. A toilet, a sink, bunks, a laundry line, rowdy towels, books, blank walls. Then he said, You. You want to see me? I asked. Yes, I'd like to look at another person when I go blind, he said. That seems nice. What was I supposed to say to that? Was there a way to deny such an eroding request? He'd never see this earth again, never see another sunset, a child, a fire, a narwhal. These things would all be conjectures, or they'd be memories. At least he'd have those we all knew, memories deformed with time, could disappear as our minds curdled. I stood up right in front of Dennis. He was only about 5'10", so he gazed up at me, 10 seconds of us staring, and then I asked, what should we talk about? Let's not, he said. Let's just stare at each other. We were two men. We were two animals. We had two diamonds in our chests, and we were simply staring. I had only one eye. He had two, but would soon have none that worked. Nobody else alive knew what was at stake in that moment. No one knew that another human was losing a sense, and no one would have cared anyway. A convict, a piece of shit. Good. Served him right. In one way or another, we all went blind. Then Dennis said to me, okay. Okay, what? I said. That's it, he said. You can't see anymore, I asked. The sun, said Dennis, just set on the entire solar system.
Oh, take another little piece of my heart now, baby. Thank you, Josh. I was gonna say I'll let you go, but we have two quick questions before I let you
Oh,
head off
beautiful.
to England. Um, Stephen Carrillo wants to know, Joshua, did you have Nordic death metal playing in your brain while you were writing?
Not death metal, but because I grew up in the East Bay of the Bay Area, I kind of exclusively listened to East Bay punk rock. So I was
Yeah.
listening to a lot of Rancid, a lot of Operation Ivy, a lot of Mr. T Experience, a lot of Tilt, a lot of my favorites. So certainly music was a key ingredient in the alchemy of bringing this project to life.
But no Green Day. That's an inside joke. You have to read the book to get that. No Green Day.
Well,
Uh,
I like Green Day, but Saint has a big
Same
problem with Green
problem with
Day.
Green Day. One last question from our friend, our mutual friend, Caitlin McKenna is on tonight. She
Hi,
wants to know,
Caitlin.
Josh, hey, Caitlin, Josh, have you been able to connect with any of the families and friends of the ghost ship fire victims and let them know about their characterization in the novel?
I haven't talked to any family or friends. I exclusively did my research from the journalists who covered it for the East Bay Express. They won the Pulitzer for their kind of stellar work on the project, and they were my spirit animals and my guides as I was trying to honor the legacies of those people that lost their lives.
Fabulous. I adore you. Go away.
Mwah. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Very
Everybody, Josh
much.
Mohr, bye. Safe travels home.
Cheers.
Isn't he the best, you guys? He's the best. But don't leave because we have more fabulousness coming right now in the form of Stuart Neville. Stuart Neville is an amazing novelist from Ireland. His debut novel, The Ghosts of Belfast, won the mystery thriller category of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. and it was picked as one of the top crime novels of 2009 by the ever ubiquitous New York Times. He has since published 9 novels, all critically acclaimed, and a short story collection, and he has been shortlisted for many awards, including the Irish Book Awards Crime Novel of the Year. Recently, he beamed in from his home near Belfast, Ireland, to talk about his new horror detective novel. Yes, horror detective, just wait for it. Blood Like Mine. Julie, can you roll the tape, please? Welcome, Stuart Neville, to Bookish. Thanks so much for beaming in.
Thank you very much for having me, all the way on the other side of the world.
Yeah, what time is it there in Ireland?
It is just gone 8 p.m.
Oh, so it's the witching hour, as it were.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock on a Friday, so I'm allowed to have a beer.
I
I
was going to
finished.
say, I won't keep you too long. I know you must be on the way to the pub. But anyway,
Oh, here now, that's an Irish stereotype. Now that's not. That's not.
oh, sorry. Lest I indulge in stereotypes. Forgive me, forgive me. I'm sure you were on your way to church.
Yes.
Anyway, I have to tell you before we begin how much I enjoyed this and how much my husband enjoyed this, because he stole it off my desk when he saw it, and I didn't know that it was missing, and I was looking for it and thinking, did I dream that? And he no, he took it because it looked fascinating, and we both ate it up, as it were. So take that as a compliment.
I do. Thank you. I'm glad he enjoyed it.
You did. I did too. So speaking of which, for those readers who don't know, in Blood Like Mine, we meet a mother, Rebecca, and her daughter, Moonflower, who are on the run from something obviously horrific. Meanwhile, there's also FBI agent Donner, who's tracking a serial killer who targets sexual predators. And then these stories converge in a really blood-chilling highway pursuit across the American West. Stuart, the pacing of this was amazing. But as exciting as the story is, I hear that it's not exactly the one you plan to write. So what's up with that?
Yeah, I've been writing an entirely different novel. One set in Northern Ireland, rural Northern Ireland, at the end of the Second World War. And I was 40,000 words into it, which for me is like half a novel
Yeah.
usually. And I remember I was worried at the time because I was 40,000 words in and nobody was dead yet. And I kept thinking, like, hang on, am I writing a literary novel? Which was a really worrying thought. Um, and then just kind of out of the blue, this other idea came to me.
Uh,
And I'm always very wary of the shiny new idea because anybody who's written a novel can tell you that when you're sort of in the mire of the halfway point of the book, when it's hard
it's
work,
really hard. Yeah.
yeah, and another idea presents itself, it's really shiny and bright, and it's kind of, you have to stop yourself from going to the light, as it were.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, I was kind of trying to keep this other idea at bay. So I decided to write a synopsis, thinking that would scratch the itch. um so I wrote
So
like a
just
four.
an outline, right? So you wouldn't forget your ideas, right? Essentially.
Basically, yeah, I just wanted to get it all out on the page because the idea can be really fully formed, which very rarely happens for me. Usually, I have to kind of
Oh,
take the idea out of the earth and see what it is I've got.
piece by piece.
Whereas, yeah, Blood Like Mine just came like almost one big blob of I had characters, a plot, I had setting, everything was just there all at once. So I thought, and I'll write a synopsis. That'll at least just get it out of my head for now, and then I can go back to what I should be doing. So I wrote this quite detailed synopsis, and I kind of only made it worse
Ah,
because I kept thinking this idea is so fully formed. Why don't I just write this? So I contacted my agents and my editors and sent them the synopsis. So everybody was very agreeable, thankfully, and said, yeah, I could go ahead and write this other thing. Um, and I haven't forgotten about the original book I was writing. I'm going to go back to that someday.
yeah. So was it one of this is a stereotype of fiction writers that characters start talking to you? Was it one of those scenarios, or did it just play out like a movie in your head?
It's hard to describe it. It's it's happened to me a couple of times before. Maybe I think with my first book, Ghost of Belfast, and with the book I wrote under the pen name of Pale Beck called Here and Gone,
Mm.
where there was such a kind of crystal clear idea at the heart of it that
Yeah.
everything else just kind of formed around it very, very quickly and very easily. Um, And it kind of, when it first initially falls in your head, it's kind of this kind of, as I say, like a blob almost. Then over a
Yeah.
few hours, it took shape, and I realized, are these characters, they're going to do this, and I had the whole arc of the story and everything there. Um, but if that's something that very rarely happens, I think it says maybe 3 books in my entire career of doing this for 15 years
Yeah.
that that's ever happened.
Were you a musician beforehand? Because I see those cool axes in your background.
I have been a musician, still a musician to some extent. I studied music at college. It was my original career choice. I had, my life plan was to be a rock star. I thought until I thought I was, so I from my 18th till I'm 35, I'm going to be a rock star. 35 seemed a good idea. Yeah,
Sure.
that seemed the way to do it. But by the time I got to 35, I realized the rock star bit wasn't going to happen. So I thought I'd fall back on my second career then, which was to be a writer. But I
And
still
I'm sure
play.
your parents were so happy about both of those choices, right? Talk about job security.
Yeah,
Anyway.
still careers. Yeah, I'm still in a band with other crime writers called the Fun Loving Crime Writers.
Oh, love it.
Um,
Lovely.
with Val McDermott, Mark Billingham, Chris Brookmeyer, Luca Vessi, and Doug Johnson. All the songs we play are crime related. So we do I Fought the Law and Watching the Detectives, that kind of thing. So we've played lots of festivals and stuff. So I still have a reason to own the guitars, thankfully.
I think that's wonderful. Well, we know who to book for if we ever do a book festival down here. We'll call you guys up.
Be great.
I wanted to, speaking about coming over here, I wanted to ask you about research for this novel because there you are in the darkest Ireland. And you render the West and American culture so vividly in this book. And as someone who spent a lot of time in RV parks myself, I can tell you, you nailed it. I just wanted to know about that and what research you did, or if you needed to do research. Have you been hanging out in RV parks in Colorado in your life? What's the deal?
Not necessarily RV parks, but I spent a fair bit of time between Arizona and parts of Colorado. There are two sides to this. One is that I grew up watching Starsky and Hutch and Cheers and all those American TV and watching American movies. So to slip into an American voice isn't that difficult. I'll still get things wrong. I'll still use turns of phrase that don't work, and thankfully I have American editors that can correct me on that. But in terms of the actual setting, this specific setting, I'd done a couple of road trips. Uh, from one was from sort of the Phoenix metro area up to Flagstaff,
Uh-huh.
and that extraordinary change of geography from the low desert up to the Colorado Plateau, and all of a sudden you're in pine forests and
Yeah.
thousands of feet elevation. Um, but also a great friend of mine called Betsy Dornbush, who lives in a town called Superior outside Denver. She took me on a road trip up into the mountains. We went to the Stanley Hotel, inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining, for example. So it spent a fair bit of time just driving around that area and always taking photographs, making notes, and filing it away because I knew it'd be useful at some point. And the RV parks specifically, I read a lot of RV park reviews, which can help that.
Well, if you ever want to have real ones, come with us next time. My
Oh,
husband is a
okay.
big fan of that whole world. So anyway, I knew you'd flown into Denver International because I love the demon horse description at the beginning and how it becomes perhaps an omen of things to come. Not to give anything away, but anyway. Um, One other thing I loved about this book is that the complicated mother-daughter relationship is really an engine of the story. It's not just the fast-paced plotting of who gets killed and what happens, but there's real heart and real emotion in this novel, specifically in that relationship for me. But there was also a sense of moral ambiguity at almost every level with every character. There's the mother who protects her daughter at all costs, no matter what. And then the agent, Donner, is seeking justice for the worst kind of person, but yet he's determined to get justice. What's the attraction there for you? What is it about that makes it so compelling to write into?
Um, I've taken a couple of parts of that. I mean, the relationship between Moonflower and Rebecca. It's not a coincidence that I have a daughter who's just turned 13.
Ah,
Um, a few months ago. So there's a certain amount of that in it, and all the drama that goes with it. But also,
So you're
yeah,
living your research, basically. You're living your
basically. I mean, there are even specific things in the first chapter. There's a moment where Rebecca says to Moonflower that she's tired. She can tell because that which
yeah.
my daughter still does. She's done it since she was a baby, and she still does it now when she's tired. She'll do this thing of rubbing her nose. So it's very often those things come out in the details in the finer threads of her characters on the page. But in terms of moral ambiguity, that's the thing that's always attracted me as a reader and a writer and in stories in general. Um, I mean, I like a sort of white hat, black hat kind of story as much as anybody. Whether Star Wars or something like that. Yes, I like a clearly defined good guy and bad guy. But other times, I really do enjoy that sense of not being quite sure whose side you're on.
Yeah.
For me, the greatest example of that will always be Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. And
Is it
you can talk.
terrible that I haven't read Red Dragon by Thomas Harris? It's
Um, it is terrible, and I think you should. I think
okay.
everybody should.
All right.
And you talk to any number of crime writers, and it's one of those novels that everybody will cite as being.
That's the first Hannibal Lecter novel, is it not?
It is the first Hannibal Lecter novel. But this isn't a spoiler because it puts this up front straight away. The serial killer in Red Dragon is a man called Francis Dollarhide. It is, the book's quite clear about that fairly early on, so that's not a spoiler. But Thomas Harris does this extraordinary thing of portraying Dollarhide, and he's a monster. He's a horrific human being. He's killed children in their beds. Yet somehow Thomas Harris takes you along with him, and we get to see the world through his eyes and everything that he's gone through, what's brought him to this point, and all the struggles that he has, and the way he's trying to fight himself to not do this anymore. And by the time it gets to the end of the book, you're not sure if you're rooting for him, the killer, or if you're rooting for the FBI agent who's trying to get him.
Yeah.
And for me, that was an extraordinary feat of storytelling and characterization to actually make you question your own loyalties within the story. And so that's something I've always aspired to. And you'll find that I try for that in most of my books. In The Ghost of Belfast, for example, my first book.
I was going to say The Ghost of Belfast is exactly that same moral dilemma.
Yeah, and that book, the protagonist in that book, Jerry Fagan, is a mass murderer. He's a despicable human being, but
yet
readers loved him as a character. And I think readers can surprise you in how far they'll go along with you with a character, so long as you let the character be on the page, let them act as they act, and don't judge them, and see the world as they see the world. I think it's because human beings and readers in particular have an extraordinary capacity for empathy.
I was just going to say that. Isn't that what literature does for us? Extends our empathy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was Roger Ebert who said that movies are a machine for creating empathy. And I think books are the same. And for me, that's that the sweet spot for me is, and I hope this happens in Blood Like Mine, is where you're not quite sure. Your allegiances will change as you read.
Yes.
For a few chapters, you might be on Donner's side. For a few chapters, you might be on Rebecca's side, and you'll be teetering on that edge all the way to the end. Hopefully,
you do. Absolutely, you succeeded. Sam Dunn says you succeeded, so therefore you succeeded. I have to say, the promos that I received on this book called it your foray into horror writing. But as we were just talking earlier, you've had this element of the supernatural since your very excellent first novel, The Ghosts of Belfast, which I understand in the UK was called The 12. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. But yeah, there's this very strong supernatural element in that book, and the clue being in the title.
Yeah.
Really.
Of course.
But there was an ambiguity to it as well, as to whether these. The premise of that book, I should explain for people who haven't read it, is a man called Jerry Fagan, who was a paramilitary killer during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Finds himself haunted by the ghosts of all the people that he killed, and they are seeking revenge for their own deaths. But the book walks a very fine line all the way throughout of not quite telling you whether these are actual supernatural beings or if these are just manifestations of his guilt.
Right.
And I guess the difference with Blood Like Mine is that there's no ambiguity in that regard. It fully steps over that line. But I don't. Uh, I know Soho have framed it that way. Soho Press, my publisher, and it's part of their new horror imprint. But for me, it didn't feel that big of a step. For me, it felt like
Yeah.
the territory I'd been on before,
Mm.
and it's still very much structured as a thriller. I think anybody who enjoys that the sort of the pace and the sort of kinetic energy of a thriller would enjoy it. Just with that extra bit of woo woo
Extra,
seasoning.
extra twist, extra
Yeah,
surprise. And you never
indeed.
quite know when it's coming. You're wondering what's going on. And then when you discover, you're, oh my gosh, didn't see that coming. Or did I? Um, I have to say, you've said in the past that Stephen King has been an influence on your writing. I can see it in your pacing and in your humor and in the darkness of as we've discussed, the moral dilemma of the characters. But I gotta say, we were talking about stereotypes just a minute ago, and I'm just wondering about that cultural stereotype of the Irish culture. You know, in Irish mythology, it's rich with mystical elements, supernatural beings. My grandmother always used to tell me that if I wasn't good, the banshees were going to get me. Um, is that just part of your consciousness, this thinness of the veil between worlds?
Um, Possibly. No, interestingly, I can't say an awful lot about it, but I'm working on an original TV series at the moment.
Oh,
Um,
you
that
heard it here
is
first,
set.
folks.
I'm sorry.
Said you heard it here first,
Oh
folks. Anyway,
yes.
please go ahead.
But it's set here, and it very much delves into uh that kind of the Venn diagram of religion and superstition,
Mm,
and the kind of friction between sort of the ancient beliefs and modern beliefs and so on.
yeah.
And my mother's very religious, for example, but we weren't a particularly religious household. But there was still always that element of superstition and everything. And I know I'm from a Protestant side of the community. I know people from the Catholic side of the community um, would also have their own ideas of relics and mystical power of objects, that kind of thing. And I think it is, yes, it is a very Irish thing, and it cuts across the divide. You know, whether from the Protestant background or the Catholic background, that um that superstition is still in the soil that you grow up from. You know, and it's everybody has it, and it's changing. You know, I don't know if my kids would have that in the same way that I did growing up, but it's still out there.
Interesting. Interesting. Speaking of kids, I also teach writing at a local university, and all of my students now are reading horror and or eco horror or some slash horror combination. And I've talked to agents recently, and they say the genre is just exploding. What do you think makes the horror genre so attractive for readers at this particular juncture? Do you have any theories?
Um, I think because the world has gone a little bit darker
Mm,
over the last few years, and I kind of relate this back maybe to the 70s, um, where America, for example, was coming out of the Vietnam War, and there were oil crises, and everything seemed to be kind of on the precipice. And at that time, I think there was a move towards much more escapist fiction, and that could have been stuff like a movie like Love Story, for example, or
okay.
there was a big boom in kind of very sentimental stories at that time. But there was also that huge boom in the mid to late 70s in horror. And I think we're maybe seeing something like that again now, where the world, as I say, has just gotten that bit darker in the last few years. And people are looking for escapism, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want something that's light and fluffy and soothing.
Yeah.
A lot of people do, and there's absolutely nothing at all wrong with that. Everybody seeks their comfort where they can, and it's. So you've seen this big rise in romance fiction and romanticy, that kind of thing. But there are also people who want escapism, but they want something a bit darker, and I think horror gives that to them. And it's gonna be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years, because horror had fallen so far out of the mainstream that almost become a counterculture thing, and had been very much adopted by LGBTQ community, for example, is the huge surge in I guess queer horror maybe would be the name for it. Uh, horror became very much owned by sort of marginalized groups, I think. Now, if it's coming back in the mainstream, I think it's going to be interesting to see what influence that has had on it. You know, the fact that it's gone on this journey through lots of different kinds of people and is now coming back into the mainstream.
Fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating to me. Thank you for that. That's something to think on. Literally exercising our demons, I guess. Okay, I don't want to take forever with you because I know you're probably a very busy guy on a Friday night, but the ending is so exciting and so satisfying, but it also leaves a wee crack for something more to come. Is there going to be more, Stuart, of Blood Like Mine?
As it happens, I am once I finish this, once I've had something to eat, I'm going to sit down and start writing because I'm literally a couple of thousand words away from finishing the sequel.
The sequel?
Yeah, which is I'm going to hopefully finish it this weekend, the first draft. The plan all along has been for it to be a trilogy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I left that sort of door open for myself in Blood Like Mine. So the next book, which is provisionally titled Blood Like Ours, will hopefully be out around this time next year. And one of the things it does, there's a hint in Blood Like Mine that Moonflower's nature and what's going on with her, there are other people like her in the world. That there's a wider world to this
Yeah.
story. And the second book starts to take a step into that wider world. And the third book, the ideas will expand on that a bit more. So we're going to try and sort of build this universe, if you like, that story takes place in. Beyond that, I don't know if I have more stories to tell based in the same world. I'll do it. I think I'll just have to see when I get there.
Well, you have another book to write even after you finish these trilogies, you know, your 40,000 words you have to get back to.
Oh, yeah. I will go back to it.
Stuart, when the book comes out, please come back so we can talk about it some more. I love this. You guys, everybody, get Blood Like Mine. Stuart Neville. You can see the whole thing. Really recommend it. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you very much. You too.
Bye. Well, there you have it, folks. 2 scary reads for your October nightstand. I really, truly, honestly hope that you look both these books up. Thank you, Josh and Stuart, for joining us tonight. Thank you, everybody. Also, thanks to our production manager, Julie Corlett, who's the magic behind the curtain here. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's conversation, and Bookish will be back next month with another lineup of great authors. Also coming back for a quick visit is our old host, Sandra Singlow, so be sure to come back. Meanwhile, catch up on our past episodes and check out our other virtual programs too at, as you have probably memorized by now, scng.com/virtual events. If you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or if you have additional questions, please email us at events@scng.com. We love to hear from you. And if you want to give me suggestions on the show directly, reach me at sdunn@scng.com. And remember, you can always find great coverage on books in our newspapers every single day and online at our sites. In fact, here's books editor Eric Peterson to tell us what's coming up.
Hey, thanks everybody. This weekend in the paper, we have some very scary stuff. Emily St. Martin, my colleague, she is much braver than I am, so she looked at a bunch of very scary books that are coming out this fall, and check that out. It's a really fun story. You'll get some good recommendations for books. We've also got 2 other features about scary things, scary books. Don't miss those. I am also working on a piece right now, currently, about cookbooks that should be available to you by the time you see this. If not, I will have lied to my editor and said that I was sick. So just everybody go along with that, okay? One of the books I talk about is the 20th anniversary of Anthony Bourdain's book. There's a whole bunch of other ones that are just brand new. It's really fun. I hope you will find things either to give as a gift or to learn a new recipe from, because that's what I'm doing. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Have a great night, everybody. See you next month. Bye.